leaving the city for my vacation, I had to make sure that I packed enough books for the entire vacation. Last time I went on vacation, I definitely did not pack enough, and I only packed 3 books. I went right through those books. So this time I packed more than plenty. The Alienist by Caleb Carr. This is a sick book. We read it for the Wicked Words book club. And the book itself, it takes place in the 1800s. I thought this was a classic. This is not a classic. This is actually written in like 1994. And Caleb Carr did a lot of research. This book is heavy in history. It's about a serial killer that's loosely based on Albert Fish, who, if you guys remember, a couple months back, I ended up reading a true crime novel on, and what a sick fuck that guy is. From my nonfiction book club, the assigned reading for next week is The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace-Wells. The cover has a deceased little bee on it, so I'm hoping that it's not as grim as the cover, but let's see. The cover does have a little blurb, and it says life after warming, so I hope it's not as grim as it sounds. And if you guys follow me on Instagram, you know that I started a classic science fiction book club, and on September 9th, we will be having our first meeting. Reach out to me if you are interested, and I will send you the Discord link. Our first book for the club will be The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. I feel like this is a great gateway drug to science fiction for any beginners, since the theme of the book club is a beginner's guide to classic science fiction, and I can't think of a better place to start than this. Back in the city, one of my neighbor's daughters, who is 13 years old, actually loves Mitch Albom, and I decided to start reading some of Mitch Albom's books so that I could keep up with the conversation with this next young generation. And so who else can say they have a little 13-year-old book buddy that they like to read some books and discuss books with? Well, I do. Cycle of Fire by Clement is another classic sci-fi. Clement is another author I've never read or explored before. Check out this cover. It looks really, really cool. And it looks like a quick read, so this might be a nice palate cleanser between all the grim shit that I tend to read. Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury is another Ray Bradbury book that I've never explored. So I've been a Ray Bradbury fan since I was about maybe 11, 12 years old when I was introduced to the Martian Chronicles. And it's just awesome to read it, right? And a couple years ago, I read Something Wicked This Way Comes, and the other day somebody saw I had this in my TBR pile and said, actually, it's a pretty good companion to follow up Something Wicked This Way Comes. And I said, well, actually, I did just read that as the last Bradbury book, so more than happy to follow it with this one. The Rats by James Herbert. So James Herbert is an interesting author because I think that he writes horror and fantasy. So it's one or the other. But The Rats is such a cult classic in the horror genre of books that I can't think of anyone that hasn't read it who hasn't highly recommended this one. And I believe it's part of the Rats trilogy. Lair is another one, The Rats, and I forget what the third book is in the series, but I'm glad to start with this one. And honestly, that cover is so sick. It's a little bit beat up. It's a little bit older, and that's especially why I have it in this Mylar now. Jack of Shadows by Roger Zelazny. So the last Zelazny book I read was Damnation Alley, and I freaking loved it. It reminded me of Mad Max in book form. So this is another one that's going to be fairly short, fairly quick. Looking forward to it. The Secret People by John Wyndham. Somebody posted this cover on Instagram and I absolutely fell in love with it and went out and I looked for it and I found it. John Wyndham is somebody that I recently discovered that I truly enjoy. He is an English author. He did a lot of like horror, sci-fi-ish type of books. I started with The Day of the Triffids. That's an excellent place to start, but he has so many good books. I'm looking forward to digging into this. This is a little bit longer than I think The Day of the Triffids was, but that was such a quick read. I actually ended up trying to prolong the read because I enjoyed it so much. The story was so good. And so I started my Hyperion Cantatos series a couple months ago. And I read the first 3 books in the set as a back-to-back, one after the other in consecutive months. And so I decided to take a little bit of a break before reading the final book. And I'm glad I did because one of my friends who also was reading the Cantos at the same time that I was said that this 700-page finale had a lot of repetitive information. So if you're reading it in series, it just feels a little bit redundant. And so I'm glad I took a little break, and because it'll serve as a refresher when I do dive back into the Cantos to finish it off. And I'm really excited. I really like Dan Simmons' writing. I really like the Hyperion world. It's a pretty epic series to get through. I'd be more than happy to discuss it with anybody. The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. So this is a nonfiction that is about the World Fair and in Chicago, and it's about the serial killer H.H. Holmes. And actually, I just had a book club meeting with Wicked Words, and they were talking about this book, and they mentioned it. And so I'm excited that I brought it with me because everybody highly recommends this story, and it sounds like a really interesting format to a nonfiction, that there's like a dual story happening at the same time, and that's really cool. So I've never read Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. It's a book that kind of like fell through the cracks for me in the classic genre. I love the cover on this one. It's so cool. But the reason why I picked it up is because I ended up getting an arc of Koja's ode to Withering Heights of Catherine the Ghost. And it's a short novella, and I read 1 or 2 chapters and decided, you know what, I really do have to read this in order to know what's going on in this. So I'm excited to do that. A book I picked up one of the times I recently went to Strands is Hailey Piper's splatter western. And so Cruel Angels Past Sundown. I recently read a short story of Hailey Piper's in a book that's going to be coming out this winter of Christmas and holiday folk horror. And I really enjoyed Hailey Piper's story in that, and decided that the next time I come across one of her books, I'm just going to grab it. And I'm glad because I never ventured into the splatter westerns yet, so I was so stoked to find this at the store. The Cold Vanish by John Billman. So this book, I believe, is a newer nonfiction. It deals with all the people that go missing in the wilderness in North America. And so that's really cool. I see there's like a map in here somewhere, and I'm excited to read it. I heard good things about this book. I don't know much else about it, actually. Full Immersion by Gemma Amor. This will be a first for me from Gemma. I am excited to dive in. I read some really cool reviews. I got this one actually from the UK because it came with a signed book plate from a bookstore / book club. And I'm so excited. I got it from the Abominable Book Club. I believe that's what they're called. I'm not sure if it's a subscription box or... But anyway, they individually sell their signed books. And I'm stoked about this one because it is sci-fi. It sounds like a science fiction horror. Although it says it's speculative fiction. I guess that's the new term that horror novels are now using. But I'm stoked about getting into this because I think that it's a little bit different than what I usually read, and it has really good reviews. So stoked about that. A friend of mine on Instagram, Phrique, actually wrote he calls it gigglecore or giggle punk, but I mean, that alone got me, and I was like, fuck it, I'm buying this because this is gonna be fun as hell. But it's called Gig of the Damned, and so I'm not sure if it's supposed to be, I think it's extreme horror and or splatterpunk. I'm not too sure, but this book is absolutely beautiful, and I know his sense of humor, and so I expect nothing less than absolute greatness. I am not going to butcher Agustina's last name, so I won't say it, but Tender is the Flesh is a book I also recently picked up in a used bookstore on my travels through, I think I was like traveling through New Jersey, and I was like, let me just see if there's any bookstores, and I happened to go in, and this was one of their books, and I was like, cha-ching, I haven't found this book anywhere. I like supporting used bookstores, so I tend to go to a lot of used bookstores instead of like the big Barnes and Noble or just ordering everything online. So I was stoked to finally find this. So, Mississippi Blue by Brittany Johnson is a Southern Gothic novel, and I think this is self-published. Yep, this is self-published and very nicely designed. So Brittany reached out to me and was like, hey, I really want you to read my book. I'll send you a copy. And I felt bad, and I was like, I'll pay for it. You know, I don't really like receiving free stuff or whatever. So I ended up buying this book, but I'm so happy that I did because it's absolutely stunning, and it's a genre that I don't really dive into outside of like Michael McDowell, right? Where the Sun Didn't Shine is a true crime / New York City based novel, which is two genres of books that I absolutely love. And the fact that they come together is even better. Now, here's another aspect of it. It's a book about a Black NYPD officer in Harlem, New York City in the 70s. So I think this is going to be a multi-layered book, and I'm looking forward to diving in. This is going to be a really cool, like, true crime, historical, nonfiction read for me. I'm completely excited about it. Rainbow Black by Maggie Thrash. I found this, surprisingly, I paid 75 cents for this book. I randomly found it at a used bookstore, and I don't know if they didn't know what it is, or I have no idea. But this just came out this year and has a ton of good reviews. This is a horror. I don't even know what subgenre it is. I have no clue, but I believe it's like a queer horror story. I just don't know the details of it, but man, the reviews speak for themselves. I'm in. And basically, that's it, guys. Like, that's all the books I brought, and I'm so excited to dive in. I really am. And I'll let you guys know what I think of them. Till next time.